today with another SPFBO 9 finalist. Tonight it's K.E. Andrews. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'll just let everyone know, in case you're not aware, that Katie was in Fantasy Faction, and there were a lot of wildly talented authors in that group.
Yeah, she kicked your ass, man.
And she just crushed us all under her jackboots, and she smiled the whole time while doing it. But Katie, I bet you've not been introduced that way before.
No, that's a first for me.
Yeah, jackboot imagery is few and far between.
Makes me want a pair of jackboots now.
Little skulls embroidered along the side or something?
Yeah, little flowers and skulls, Got to have that balance.
There you go. So I will show your book. This is the one that is currently in the running in SPFBO 9. You just went it over my face.
Uh-huh.
I told you I'm the one that brings the sexy with this wonderful face here.
Bring it.
So, Katie, you had to bring some responsibility to this conversation because Ro and I will not. So, how has it been, SPFBO 9, being a finalist this year? I know you were semi-finalist last year and that close to making it to the finals.
Yeah. So my time as semi-finalist this year was very short. Because as you know, our faction did not release anything until like the last moment. So it was the 29th, they announced semi-finalists. So I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is as far as I'm going to get. I was prepping for surgery the next day. And then I wake up the day of my surgery and people are like, hey, congrats on finalists. And it was just like, what is happening? Did I die? Is this real? So it was still that like whole week of recovering after surgery. I was like, did I imagine that? Is that real? So it was just a quick, little sticker change of semi-finalist to finalist. And even now, sometimes I wake up, I'm like, is my book still a finalist? It is. So it's still very weird.
Do you redo your book to put that sticker on the cover?
Like, I should.
Yeah,
I really should. Connor did it really fast, and I was like, I should probably do that as like the ebook cover, but I just didn't get around to it. I guess maybe because it didn't feel that real. So I was like, well, if I do this, and then they're like, well, psych, you're not a finalist, then I'll have to change the cover again. So maybe once the competition's over, I will update the cover to show like this is indeed real.
That is a whole new level of imposter syndrome right there, Katie. That's, I mean, they told you.
I have the coin to prove it, but again, sometimes it's like, is this a joke? Is this, Mark's idea of, a prank? I don't know sometimes. Yes, what Ed said, I am still in surgery. This is
and what a weird surgery it is if we're here with you.
Yeah.
Well, that's scary. So do you have the coin with you? Do you keep it?
I do.
Coin checking everybody, dude. If they produce a coin when you coin check them, you owe a round to the bar. You know that, right?
Yeah. Hold on.
So do you know my mandatory questions now, or do you have the coin? And then the next thing I'm going to ask you is about what is the chat like that you all are in?
Yeah, I was thinking about that because I watched Ed's interview and I was like, what am I going to tell him about our chat? It still is mostly food. Right now, we kind of shifted to Avatar today, but we were also talking about it's wild, but mostly food.
What kind of food related nonsense do you talk about on there?
This last one was about pizza, because someone does not like pizza.
What?
And someone only likes pizza. So we were talking about different pizza combinations at some point.
Can I guess, is Connor the one who only likes pizza?
No.
Wow, that would have been my guess. I swear, El Montague, I am not. I don't know how to.
That would be way beyond Mike's scope of figuring anything out to do that. But, now, the whole cheese thing, so Ed says Connor doesn't like cheese. My son's lactose intolerant, can't eat cheese, has never eaten cheese, but he will eat a pizza.
I don't know if Connor's lactose intolerant. I think he just doesn't like cheese, which is, normal because it can be weird. But I don't think we dove into that part of the question. It was just like someone in there doesn't like cheese.
Did the whole pineapple thing come up? Pineapple?
Surprisingly, no. I think
Really? I would have thought that would have been the big kind of take sides issue.
No, I think Clayton was trying to create a disgusting pizza, but he's also apparently a chef or was a chef or just cooks really well. So he came up with a really good sounding pizza. And then I had suggested a really disgusting pizza. And then I also kind of made myself sick thinking about that. So, but pineapple did not come up surprisingly.
That's the best pizza.
It is.
Stop. Just stop. If pineapple didn't come up, what makes a disgusting pizza?
I like it.
My favorite. But
You're hopeless.
okay, Ro, go ahead with the interview now.
No, that's all right. I kind of want to know what makes a disgusting pizza if pineapple doesn't make the cut. Because these
so
are
I
the
think
issues, you know?
the one I came up with was Cheetos, mayonnaise. I think there was pickles on it, and then Takis, and I don't know why, but I think it was the mayonnaise. That was, yes, Ed, that is, I can smell it from here. I think it was the mayonnaise part on there that I was like, I can't do that. I like mayonnaise, but only on a sandwich. I'm like, anything
you
else
don't
is
put
just
mayonnaise on a pizza.
But people do. But apparently that is a thing.
Pickle
makes
juice
me
is pretty
worried.
gross too.
I don't really like mayonnaise, so that was really bad.
Yeah, it was a bad combo. So that was the gross one because Clayton couldn't come up with one, which was very surprising for Clayton. So I think that was just last night's chat.
So what was your process for getting into this 41-minute race that is SPFBO this year?
So I had all my files together. I made sure to keep refreshing the page every second, just in case. That would make the clock go faster. And then I submitted, and I guess it all worked out. I didn't have a chance to join like the live parties that people had, but it sounded like a lot of fun. But I was spoiled in 2022 because there was like maybe 3 hours before it closed, which felt like all the time in the world. And so then when I saw it on Twitter, like, oh, it closed in 45 minutes, I was like, what? What happened?
So, Katie, I'm taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
What files do you need to have ready with you to go?
I should remember. So your cover, you should have the EPUB book. You should have all your links, because I think he also asked for Goodreads links, and your blurb and what category your book is in. I should know. He's really good about posting like a couple months or like a week or so before everything opens. So if you have all those things and you just have the page refreshed, make sure your internet's good, no distractions.
So it's not like something where you can like just jam in your name real quick and get in and then take your time. You've got to.
It takes about 30 seconds to complete the whole thing if you're really fast.
So, Ro, to let you know, I had everything I needed into a Word document, and I just cut and paste, and hit enter.
Mm-hmm.
I did it within the first minute, and I was the 15th person.
I don't know where I fell on the sign-in thing. How did you find out about that?
I remember seeing it. It's all blur because I had to do it, and then I told my boss, I'm like, I'm going to be a couple minutes late. I have to sign up for this, and then I will come into work afterwards.
That's
and
dedication.
So I got confirmation that I was in. I'm like, okay, now I can go to work and get a paycheck so I can eat.
I want to work where you work, man.
Oh my gosh.
It's a silly, silly place.
Yeah. What do you do, Katie?
So the job that pays the bills is I'm an office admin for an equine vet. I also do kind of freelance editing very rarely. Now that I've been writing a lot more, it's harder to do. And then I also make stickers for my own Etsy shop. So do a lot of those things, but yeah, being an office admin pays the bills.
You sell a lot of stickers?
I do. So I started my shop in, I think 2016 or 2017, and I've had over 3,000 sales since then. So by sticker standards, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we've been to a lot of comic shows, and we see people like selling stickers and things like that, and they're just like always handing it. They're
cheap, they're fun, good promotional tool.
You go to comic shows, right?
Not as much. Dragon Con was actually, no, wait. Multiverse Con was my first one in Georgia that I went to 2 years ago. I just went as just a person because I couldn't afford the table fee and I was kind of scared. But I did see GM Nair there, so that was fun. And Dragon Con was my first like big one that I attended as a person.
So
if you were going to go to one of those in cosplay, what would you go as? Would you go as a character from one of your own books, or a character, or as Mike?
It's hard because as much as I want to cosplay, Georgia in August and September is hell. And I run super hot, so all the cosplay, I would just look like I'm dying. So this year I went as a rider, which is basically my normal clothes and everything that was comfortable. But I would love to either cosplay as someone from Lord of the Rings or, oh my gosh, probably a Jedi, honestly. I have the lightsaber, so I could do that. But that's a lot of layers.
So can I jump in real quick?
No, we're talking here.
I have to compliment my own dumb luck. Because for all the SPFBO people, I was like, okay, we'll do a different background for everyone. And I was like, Katie, you know what? We're going to have all these horses running in the background.
I wondered about that.
I had no idea that you worked at an equine vet. So that's just dumb luck on my part. So
Really? It's funny though, because I've never owned a horse. I was not, okay. I did have Breyer horses as a girl, but I wasn't like obsessed with them, and I did take horseback riding lessons when I was young, but then I promptly forgot. But I will never own a horse. That is my big takeaway from working at a vet's office. Never own a horse.
There are several things, that most people should probably never own.
They're really pretty animals. I will live next to someone who has horses. I will pet the horse, but I've seen those vet bills. So I'm like, no, thank you.
You could say the same thing about Jeeps, I think. It's just, don't
and
do it.
boats.
What's that?
Yeah.
And boats.
Oh, I think you said
Oh,
goats. Goats are also a problem too, unless you have a good vet.
I always wanted a goat.
They seem fun.
Goats like self-healing. They just like wander around and eat everything.
They eat whatever, which is the problem. Because if they
but
eat something they're not supposed to eat.
You can eat the goat, though.
But if it died from something, it's that's questionable. I don't think you want to eat that.
Okay. If you want to eat it, just cook it longer. Not going to get into that. Goat is actually very good.
It is.
Yeah. Well, kid, like baby goat, is super yummy. So.
See, it's turned back to food again.
Yeah, right. Here we go. See, I think it's either food or alcoholic beverages. So I'm sure 30 years ago it used to be cigarette brands or something, but I think with writers,
that's what they talked about in the ye old YouTube.
Food and drink. I think that's what writers don't really talk to other people enough, generally to be discussing any of that. And the mannequin behind Mike is scary.
At least she didn't say me.
Not that you're aware of.
Hmm.
How can that be? That is the least offensive mannequin ever.
She just said he was scary, not offensive. Maybe he needs a hat.
He does.
I had the hood up on him, and then people kept saying, "Is that a male or female mannequin?"
We're not imposing gender rules on it.
So I was like, you know what? Whatever. But so now we're trying it down, and that's Matt from the Beard of Darkness. That's his T-shirt. So
looks good.
I put that up and realized
that's his what?
Matt from the Beard of Darkness. He produces those T-shirts and sells them.
All right.
So
you bought a T-shirt for your mannequin. What a swell guy. Is that a granny shawl on the mannequin? They are coming hard and heavy with the questions tonight.
I tell you, Robbie is just taking all kinds of incoming. So,
you have any questions for Katie?
I have questions for Katie.
All right, go ahead.
Because I started reading Assassin of Grins and Secrets, and your main character, whose name just flew out of my mind.
Sorry.
I had it 10 seconds ago, but she actually hears in colors, which is kind of cool. And then this book here, not only is the wife taller than the husband. She's necromancy, bone magic. No, I'm getting this wrong. But you also have an angry chicken. Where do you come up with these ideas?
Well, that's always a hard thing asking a writer. Like, how do you find the inspiration? It's like sometimes I don't know, it just comes. So for Assassins, I had read this like middle grade book called The Mango Shaped Space, which was the first time I'd ever seen a character in a book that had synesthesia, which is the mixing of the senses. And so specifically what's in Assassins is chromesthesia, where you can, hear the colors, see the colors. So I was like, hey, that's really cool. Let's add that into fantasy because I don't see that a whole lot in fiction, especially. So I was just like, that'd be cool. How could that be used for an assassin character? Like, would that help with her job or, anything like that? So I just thought that's cool. For Hills of Heather and Bone, that whole book, again, was not meant to write at all, but it was like 2022. And I'd seen someone's Instagram post of like a necromancy couple. It was just a photo, and I was like, that's pretty cool. And I was like, oh, what if they're like on the run doing something? And I'd kind of been toying with the idea of like a Hades and Persephone retelling, but a gender swapped one where Hades is the woman. I was like, what if it's a big buff woman? Like, that sounds intimidating for, Lord of the Dead. And then a petiter kind of male Persephone. So then that's where that book kind of came from. And the chicken, I was just like, chickens scare me. So animal companion as a chicken, that sounds, fun, but also scary. So, and that one was actually lifted from this Instagram account called The Useless Farm. And she's got an emu named Karen who hates her, but like really loves her husband for some odd reason. So she's like always fighting off the emu. So I was like, a chicken is smaller, but still terrifying.
Yeah, I mean,
to some people.
Emus, though, to be fair, are freaking huge. I mean, didn't the Australians go to war with the emus once and lose?
The emu war, and they lost. That's embarrassing.
But a chicken, I mean, you can punt a chicken.
I don't know when they get determined.
I do not recommend punting animals. That is not what we're doing.
You heard it here.
You could.
I don't know. But if some animal's coming after me and I'm not prepared, it's going to be scary. So.
But it's a chicken.
It's got claws. I'm not a very tall person, so depending on the size of the chicken, like it can get most of my legs, and I would rather not, like, if it can get slightly airborne, it's more terrifying.
You've never been on a farm at all, have you?
I have, but I've kept my distance because, again,
all right.
Most things are bigger than me, except for the chickens and most goats. So
all right.
Bad news, guys. I realized I'd muted myself, and now I've unmuted it, so you can hear me again.
Mike, you often do go through phases of minutes at a time without saying anything.
I'm normally reading the comments. And I have a question that needs to be answered because I know it will happen if you don't answer Anita's question in a timely manner.
Yeah, let's get to that then.
Yes. So I have 3 poetry books out. The first one I published, which was Let the Hurt Girl Speak, was in 2020, I think. And so that was part of a kind of poetry collection that I had started with a nonprofit group that was focused on therapeutic journaling. So the purpose was to kind of do not necessarily fictitious journals, but to kind of take whatever you're dealing with and write about it in a way that kind of gives you some distance. So you can kind of like inserting yourself into like a scene or a character, but still kind of honoring your own pain and trauma, but being able to look at it differently. So that was kind of the project we were working on to get off the ground and doing these different journal entries. So I was part of the pilot program, got to do that. And then at the end of it, kind of our goal was to help people who had gone through the program to publish if they wanted to. So I was like, yeah, might as well. And that's when I kind of got into self-publishing, was with that poetry book. Because I was like, it is very vulnerable to write about poetry, especially since a lot of it was about mental health, things I'd gone through. And so it's just like, let's just put it out there and see what happens. So it was just more of my first step of being able to write something and get it published, and then maybe other people can connect with it. And then I kind of wrote a companion novel to it, because the program we were working on was going to have like 3 different acts where you move through like the initial pain. How can you start to look at it from maybe a positive light, and then like what does it look like on the end of that? So I wrote 2 of those. They're about 30 to 40 poetry prose things each, and then I wrote a much shorter one, I think in 2022. So those were most of them center around like mental health and just painful things in my life, things I've experienced. Some of them are just more of like musings about nature, different kind of things I've observed in the world. So those are kind of what those are. But they were a lot of fun to write, and I didn't think I would ever write poetry because I hated it in high school. And then I took a poetry class in college and was like, oh, so this is what poetry is.
Right.
It's this thing, which is basically what all writing is you trying to capture something on a page.
So
Poetry
I have
just
this up for
specifically.
John. John, you need to write poetry about roosters to get over this. That is what the take-home message from this episode is.
Honestly, it's probably going to be very healing. A nice little haiku.
Do you find that you can get the same type of, well, if not the same type, but a certain type of emotional release from writing fantasy fiction as well, in how you write your characters and how they deal with things? You get that same kind of release?
Yeah. Obviously not all of my characters are things like I've experienced. There's like a very thin line. But I think, from a reader standpoint of, reading is to me more of like an empathetic exercise of how can I put myself in this character's shoes, even though it's not something I have gone through or choices I would have made or anything like that. It's like, can I see myself as this person? And so we as writers always strive to make likable characters, or if you're writing like really terrible characters, to evoke some sort of emotion with whatever character you're writing. So I can find it really cathartic, especially in like fight scenes. Sometimes like a sad scene, I always seem to gravitate more towards the sad feelings, sometimes just because you need that cathartic release, I think. But also if you're able to capture like those really happy moments, I've heard it somewhere that if you as a writer cry over something you've written, most likely your reader's going to do that. And I've had moments like that. And so when I hear readers are like, oh, I cried at this scene, I'm like, me too. And I mean, it'll hit people in different like seasons of life. Hills of Heather Bone, especially, that was more of an exploration through grief and just anxiety and trying to navigate life when things are very uncertain. And so kind of taking from my own experience and then also going through that while I was writing the book, I was like, okay, this is my own, this is more of a release than I thought it was going to be. But it was the book that I needed at the moment and was hopefully going to be the book that someone else maybe needed.
And that's
So
when you wrote during COVID? That's when you wrote during COVID?
The poetry books, yes.
Oh.
So
you're taking your fantasy to a slightly deeper place than like Dragonlance.
I think, genre fiction has its place, and it can still kind of be a depth of some sort, but it really just depends on like what you're kind of wanting to convey to a reader. And I think as indie authors, we have the ability to go more deeper into those themes because there's no one saying, well, you need to make it focused on this by industry standards. So we can have like a whole short story based on like our own mental health psyche that takes place in a zoo, which I think AC Crosshead did, which was really cool. So, you have the freedom as an indie author to do that probably a little bit more than trad. Not saying trad books can't really hit that deep emotional vein, but I personally connect more to books that have like a deeper kind of emotional theme. But sometimes, Dragonlance is fun if you're like, hey, I just want a good solid fantasy book that doesn't hurt me.
Yeah, it's something you can read for 5 minutes at a time while sitting down doing, whatever. And it doesn't matter. You can come and, dip in and out. But you're absolutely right, I think, about the opportunities within the self-publishing kind of indie author world, because you can tackle anything, and there's nobody telling you no, right? Now, there are things that people tackle that maybe someone should have told them no. Yeah. But if it's written well, it doesn't matter. I think you kind of get into how many movies or books have you ever heard about where, you know, someone didn't want it made, right? Someone said, "Oh no, we don't want to do this." Okay, total. I just saw something shiny. A couple of years ago, I heard that they were making a Wile E. Coyote movie.
I saw that.
Right? Right? And
Mhm.
I saw like an old post I made on Facebook or something years ago that just said, "Take my money now." And apparently the movie is done,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not going to release it.
Yeah.
Right? And apparently it did super well with test groups and everything else.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, those bastards are not going to release that movie. And free Wile E. Coyote. Damn it.
What's
Okay.
wild?
I don't know where that came from, but I thought it needed to be said.
No, I think it ties in.
What's that?
I think it ties in.
So we have another Neetha question.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you working on now or next or
Mm-hmm.
your next 6 books, whatever?
Yeah, so I'm working on book 2 in the Grinning Assassins trilogy. So that should hopefully be done this year. We'll see. I'm in second round of revisions, and then it'll go to beta readers, and then it just needs copy edits, more revisions, and then to hopefully get to a better place. Because that's what I was supposed to be working on in 2022 and 2023, and then I didn't. I wrote a whole separate book. I have no regrets about that, but you know.
Another of the beauty of self-publishing is the only deadlines are the ones you impose upon yourself.
Exactly. And sometimes you just have to take that little side detour. So, and it was a good reset. And then obviously it made finalists. So I'm like, well, it's definitely worth it. So yeah, I'm working on book 2. I'm working on a fantasy Western that hopefully maybe will come out this year. We'll see. I need to finish it.
A Western with magic?
Mhm.
Interesting.
My goal is to kind of branch out into as many subgenres of fantasy as I can, just to see if I can.
So I'm curious what your person is going to be doing. Mixing magic in a Western is rife with possibility, I guess, is probably a good way to put it.
Mhm.
So what's your take on that?
So I was doing Cowboys and Dragons. I just thought that sounded really fun. And instead of horses, people use dragons. So there's working on the magic system right now because originally it wasn't a huge focus. And I was like, you know what? Let's play around with the magic more. You know, I haven't read a whole lot of fantasy Western, which is very unfortunate, but I have read Cold West. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. It was very dark, but I enjoyed it. And then No Land for Heroes by Cal Black. That one was really good. And then there was kind of like this, I guess it was not quite a fantasy, but it was like a circus with magical creatures and there was a dragon in it. That was basically like the lion of the show where it's like the main attraction. And I really liked that kind of world. But anything in like the gas lamp kind of realm sounds very interesting. So we'll see how it turns out.
So I have to plug a friend because he's the one who told me I needed to do audiobooks. So I wrote his name down because I can never remember any names. J.R. White, he wrote Shadow of Wolves is the first one, and that is a traditional Western, and the guy is hunting werewolves.
I'm going to write that down.
Fantastic. He's way better author than I am. He's had a sequel, and then he kind of went dark for a couple years, and I saw that he's actually writing the 3rd book in the series. Kit Barker is his protagonist, but great series. I almost ran out of gas not once but twice driving to Chattanooga because I was listening to his book, and I was like, "What's that? Oh, it's my gas light." So I was like, "Okay, need to stop and get gas," because I was so transfixed.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think John had a question further back about poets.
Yes, poetry.
Yeah. So my favorite poets, Gwendolyn Brooks, I really liked. T.S. Eliot. Oh my gosh. Tennyson. I can't name them all off the top of my head. Walt Whitman. Some of the American classics I really liked. Oh my gosh, Rumi. I really liked Rumi's poems. there's a lot. But in terms of does poetry sell well, I would say if you're traditionally published, yes. If you're indie author, it takes a little bit harder to find that poetry community. But I find like the beauty of poetry is that, you know, even people who are like, I don't like poetry, you can usually find some sort of poem if you spend enough time with it that really connects with you. So if you can find those poetry people and know how to market, you know, it works really well. So I was actually able to do a poetry reading this year, which was the first time I ever did like a live kind of reading thing. It was terrifying because I tend to go too fast when I'm nervous. So that was the biggest critique the person had. And I was like, cool. So I'm never going to read again out loud. But he had done like a really cool collection of nature poetry based on Atlanta state parks, which I thought was really cool and fascinating because, you know, nature poetry is always interesting because if you can tie in kind of a metaphysical theme to it or some sort of existential theme, it hits a lot deeper. But, you know, I think poetry, it depends on who you're trying to sell to. But, you know, I didn't do poetry to make money. I was just like, I wanted to do this because this is what I wanted to write.
Yeah.
With your poetry reading, was it just you, or were you one of several who were reading that at that night?
There were several people. One woman, she memorized all of her poems, which was just phenomenal. I'm reading from my book. I'm just like, I hope this is okay. So it was a very small gathering, but it was a really good experience just to meet other poetry authors because it's like, I know they're around, but like, I don't know where they are. So, and then I also heard the guy on NPR, the one who wrote the nature poetry. So I was like, oh, cool. So that's how you do it. That's how you market your books. Because this book is like $40. I was like, I don't have $40. It looks like a really good book and it sounds really good. I just don't have $40 for that.
So, Katie, would you like to confirm or deny Ed's comment here?
Oh, yes. For some
we're
reason,
interviewing Clayton tomorrow.
So there was Clayton, we were discussing something he had done on Twitter the other day, and based on like one of the comments he said, so it was like, oh, so this is Cold West 2, because sometimes we'll be like, oh, that sounds like an idea for another book, Clayton. So it came up with like the three other ones in his, you know, series if he decides to do that. Don't know how he will, but you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and there's magic, so it works. So I came up with the titles for his books if he should choose to write them and use those titles. No guarantees, but I'll be here for it.
Okay, and John, I guess we're still talking about poets here.
Mm-hmm.
So I do not know Anne Sexton, but
I think I've heard the name.
Also...
I'm really bad when I hear author names and book names. I'm like, I'm positive I've seen that but there's a lot of books in the world. It's like when people ask you what's your favorite book, I'm like, I don't know. There's a lot.
The next one.
Yeah. Katie, it just gets worse as you get older, by the way. The whole
I'm already dealing with it.
Yeah, I don't even know who this guy is over there.
I walk into a room, I'm like, what did I do? What was I supposed to do? I'm like, my parents are like, you're too young. I'm like, I understand that, but
that's what makes it worse. I know I'm too young.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So, oh my God! Speaking of too young, oh, totally forgot it. Help me out, Mike.
Okay, so I will go back to my list of questions I have.
Yes, please. It'll come to me.
So, when did you first decide you wanted to be a fantasy writer?
Very good question. So I kind of started writing when I was in middle school, and I was doing fan fiction, which was pretty much all anime stuff. And then it was, I think, end of middle school, I was like, you know, I want to write a fantasy series. And I did. It was 8 books long, and they were, I thought, the greatest thing in the world. They were a lot. And then I got like halfway through high school and I was like, oh, these are trash. So I scrapped that project, and then I started The Assassin of Grins and Secrets based off of a Sarah J. Maas book that I was like, you know, I like the premise, but let's see if we can write it a little bit better. So probably middle school, high school, I was like, you know, that sounds like a great thing. I grew up reading Tolkien. I smuggled in the Harry Potter books when I was young and read those. Chronicles of Narnia.
Hold on. You smuggled them?
I wasn't allowed to read them as a child, so I just kind of hid them in my book bag and brought them home to read.
You're in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a Georgia thing?
No, it's just
Okay.
my mom didn't like the magic system in it. She was like, "It's witches." I was like, "But we read Chronicles of Narnia."
Right.
I don't get it. I'm not
Right.
piecing together. I guess maybe if Aslan was Jesus in Harry Potter,
There
it would
you
have
go.
been fine. But it was okay.
Narnia
But Harry
Church
Potter
Street.
turned out not to be like my favorite series as much as like the Redwall series was, or Tolkien's works. So I just always loved fantasy. So I just felt like that's a really fun thing to write.
Did you throw away your 8-book, young adult or tween opus?
I still have it on my desktop, and I originally thought I was going to save parts of it, and then I whittled it down to, okay, the main character's name is the only thing I could use somewhere else.
So it wasn't a
It was
complete
all
waste.
bad. No, okay, I will say it was good in my foundation of how to like write a plot, how to write characters, how to write dialogue. Doesn't mean it was good, but it was a foundation starting point.
Sure.
And then I realized, oh, this isn't good. So we're going to learn from that and move on to another, hopefully better project.
But 8 books, and you took one word away from that.
Yeah, they were like 300 pages each. I was insane.
Wow. 300 pages each.
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
That's a great story, though, when you're on NPR one day. But you have to NPR it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say something.
Well, the fan fiction part's fun because no one knows where it is. I know where it is, but no one knows where it is because I can't log into my
You can
account.
say something very highbrow and sophisticated, like, I only took one word away from 2,400 pages that I wrote as a young child, but that one word
I'll write that down.
was,
I'll quote you on that when I ever get on NPR.
and then they will cut to one of the old car guys doing a commercial for something.
Mm-hmm.
So, Katie, you said you read Redwall and you liked it. You like Tolkien. Have you read any of Ed's book he's writing about the rat pirates?
I was very intrigued when he talked about it, and honestly, he's right. The foxes and the rats are villainized so much. And I'm like,
Okay.
all right, okay. But what about the badger? Badgers are mean. Why are they not vilified?
Foxes aren't always vilified.
They are, which is such a shame.
There are, times where the fox is the good guy.
I love that. Are those Lego
Oh yeah, God, yeah.
transportations on the? Yes. Okay, I thought that in one of the last interviews. I'm like, I bet those are all Legos, and I love it.
That's my nerd button. So
I feel that. But yeah, I am very excited for Ed's book. I think I keep now sending him rat things on the Discord. I'm like, put this in your book. Is this real? We keep asking him rat questions. It's just fascinating. Because me as a writer, I'm like, if I ever write about rats, now I know more things about rats.
He could make the chicken the bad guy in his book.
Honestly, I would believe it.
What do you think, Ed? An evil chicken?
Chicken pirate.
Nice.
I still think he should call the series Pirates and just put like the dash in between.
Oh yeah.
Because when he said pirates, all I could think of was the Muppets Treasure Island with the rats on the boat. And I'm like, this is not what it's going to be, but that's all I'm going to hear.
Muppets are classic. It's just,
yes.
People don't know what they're missing.
Mm-hmm.
Our chickens used to eat rats that broke into their houses. Really?
I've seen chickens eat their own kind, so that's why I'm terrified of them.
Well, rabbits do that too, though.
Rabbits do that. I saw a chipmunk once eating a dead squirrel, and I was like, nature's real violent. So,
question for you, Katie. For your characters, for your books, do you like to do good versus evil? Or are you different? Everybody's a shade of gray. What do you go for?
First book, the assassin book, most people are morally gray. There's maybe a handful of people who I would consider decent. But I like exploring the themes of, anyone can make a mistake, or do something if pushed hard enough that's not good. But also on the flip side, people who have kind of made mistakes are either doing them for a particular reason, or they can have some sort of like quote unquote redemption. So Hills of Heather and Bone was a little bit different because I was like, okay, there's some like clear cut, good characters, and they don't really make bad choices. So that one was a little bit different because the other book series I wrote was a lot darker. But I really love morally gray characters just because I'm like, what made you this way? Are you handling this the best way? What separates you from being a villain and, burning the whole world down? And, it's a multitude of reasons sometimes.
They are a lot more fun, but to be fair, I think it's easier to write a morally gray character because you just think about what you would do if you had no constraints, right? I think it's really difficult to write a character like a lawful good paladin would be a giant pain in the ass to write and do it appropriately because they always do stupid things. What?
Very, very easy. I went to Catholic school for 12 years. I just channel the nuns and make them males and give them a sword instead of a ruler.
Now that might be chaotic good, possibly bordering on neutral evil, but it's not lawful good. A lawful good paladin will do just some ridiculous things because, it's the proper thing to do to give the giant back his sword. I can't attack him when he's lying down. That's just
those are fun characters. Sometimes of like, okay, you're right, but in this situation you are wrong.
But the morally gray ones, you can sit there and think, what would Twisted Row do? Well,
more Twisted Row.
What? What's that?
More Twisted Row.
Yes, exactly. Twisted Row with a sword.
I'm always just also a big fan of like your actions have consequences most of the time. So especially for morally gray characters, I'm like, if you made this, bad decision, how is this possibly going to come back and haunt you? And you have no one to blame but yourself, which makes it a little bit more tragic. So whereas the good characters, it's like, oh, I feel so bad. Whereas the morally gray characters is like, well, you did stab the guy. So that might have consequences.
Going back to Potter, right? We can agree that Snape is a morally gray character. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
okay. So forewarning. I know enough about Harry Potter to be competent, and it sounds like I really enjoy the fandom, but I had to tell my best friend one time because she kept giving me Harry Potter stuff. I'm like, I don't love Harry Potter, right? She's like, what? But yes, Snape is a morally great character.
But I mean, Harry Potter is not a morally great character.
I don't know. Watching the movies, he did straight up kill a man in the first movie, and no one ever talked about it again. To be fair, it was, kind of self-defense, but like Quirrell touches him and Quirrell dies. And Harry's like, oh, well. And no one's like, does this child need therapy?
Well, no, I mean, Hogwarts is horrible. I mean,
I think their therapist died in the Chamber of Secrets, so it's fine. Right. That's the 9th novel. It's the Chamber of Therapy.
That's fantastic. That would make such a great play.
So, Katie, I will ask you a revised question. Mm-hmm. Tell us one of your favorite books.
Okay. Hold on. Let me look at my
Chamber of Therapy.
Lord.
That's the next video game room.
I gotta narrow it down to genre now. So we'll pick fantasy, which is so much easier, What's one I've read a lot? Okay, I will say Dragon Mage right now is my favorite. Okay. Lord of the Rings, OG, always going to be up there. Redwall as well. But Dragon Mage made me cry. So it stuck with me. Even though it took me about 6 months to read the whole thing, it just took so long to get through the beginning, but then once it really picked up, I was like, dang, I'm really invested in this story. And it hurt.
So
What's that one called? Dragon Mage?
Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. Yeah.
So Anita wants to know about your Harry Potter feelings.
And she even used
Okay.
you as favorite.
I will say I did like the Weasley twins. I did like them. Like, I do know my house and I do know my Patronus, and I, again, have enough knowledge to maybe be competent. I know about the discourse of Dumbledore shouting during Goblet of Fire instead of, calmly saying, Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? So I know enough, but I'm like, I don't own anything Harry Potter.
You're
nor
a
do I
Potter
have the
nerd.
desire.
Yeah, if you know your house and your Patronus and whatever the last thing was that you were talking about, you qualify. You get your
I
badge.
don't think so. Maybe it's just reluctant fan, but like I have no desire to go watch the movies on repeat, like Lord of the Rings. So
It's because the Potter movies aren't great.
yeah, I mean, to some they are.
So Katie, now we have to ask, what is your house and what is your Patronus?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope it's a chicken.
It's actually Hufflepuff. But my Patronus is weird because it's very specific on the website. It says Black Mamba, so I was very confused by that. So someone's like, "Oh, it means you have Slytherin tendencies." I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, it's a badger eating a snake. Basically, is what we're talking about. So I don't know. The quiz is just confusing. Hi, Catherine.
She did the OMG, like she surprised you're here.
Maybe she's surprised by my Harry Potter knowledge.
The Black Mamba thing.
Lack their caring. Let me say, I don't care enough, but I'm burdened with knowledge about Harry Potter.
Okay, fair enough.
I think Catherine was just saying we haven't had a good guest since she was on.
Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars. I tried Star Trek. It just didn't. I don't know. We watched both in my household, but I always gravitated towards Star Wars.
I've got nothing else for you.
I was going to say, if you want to turn this into a Star Wars discussion, we're going to be here for quite some time. And
no, that's all right.
I don't know if people wanted that.
Do you think there's more than 3 good Star Wars movies?
Yes, there are. I know 3 bad ones.
Oh, I was going to say, I know 6. Oh,
yeah.
See, it depends on who you ask.
There's 5 bad ones because episode 7 is actually episode 4, just retold with a gender swap.
Okay, I will say The Force Awakens, when it came out, here we go, Star Wars discussion. I thought it was brilliant, even though the next one was crap. It was something new for me. I think the first one I ever.
It was the original Star Wars.
The original Star Wars. Okay, the original ones were very good, but for like a new movie set with old characters, and that it was just there was something very special about it. I don't know why. I also grew up watching the Phantom Menace trailer on repeat because I was very young, and my parents didn't take me to go see it in the movie theater. So that was the first one like I ever knew that was coming out.
Okay.
But I did watch the originals growing up. I think we had the VHSs at some point, and then all I really remember are the remastered ones. But I will say I liked the Force Awakens. The other ones, the Rise of Skywalker we will not speak of that. Last Jedi was okay because of cinematography and lighting at the end, but they had questionable choices. But I will defend Force Awakens, but that's it.
So
the others are crap, and I know it.
If you'll allow me, I have a question for Ro. Did you see Star Wars: A New Hope in the theater when it first came out in 1977?
We had my hometown had one theater. Well, aside from the drive-in, it had one theater with 2 screens, and that movie came out when we were leaving school one year. And it was still on in that theater when we went back to school in the fall. And there were kids like, I've seen it 112 times. It's like, you're a dumbass. But yes, yeah, I did see it in a theater when it first came out.
So, Katie, that's how old we are.
Picture when it came out at a drive-in.
That's how old we are. We actually saw the original Star Wars in the theater on its
Not
first
a-
release.
I don't
And
believe it. I don't think you're a
it's
day over
frightening,
30,
those
Mike.
little metal speakers that you had to put in your window, right? Not through the radio. It's like there was a real shitty sound and everything. Yeah. Ugh.
Gosh. And I've seen enough of like the original scenes to say, okay, some of what George Lucas did was okay. Some of it was not very good. But you know, I think for what it was, thinking about it in hindsight of George Lucas as a director, I was like, you know, it's an okay thing that exists in the world. I really love it. It's got its flaws, but I mean, it's got those archetypes that you really love. John pointed out, Star Wars is basically space fantasy, which again is probably why I love it.
So if you have a couple hours at home and you know you've got a toothache and you're nursing a bottle of tequila or something and nobody else is around and you can watch anything you want, no one will judge you, what are you popping in?
Ooh.
That's unfair because I will judge everyone. But
That is so hard because I'm trying to think of a movie my family would judge me on. And there's not a whole lot. But I don't know, probably Lord of the Rings on the extended edition.
Really? So if because that's like that's a commitment.
It is.
There have been marriages that have lasted less time than that.
Well, yeah. But once a year, I at least try and watch all of them in one day. Same with Star Wars. You can do it in 2 days easily.
You can do Star Wars in about 45, hour 45.
Yes, if you speed through all the bad parts.
Episode 1, episode 2.
Okay, episode 3 I loved because of the music. It was just, it was going to happen, and that for me really just sold it. But I also kind of like tragic stories. So
Misa not think so.
that was a mistake. He's a Sith Lord. We all know it. They just won't tell us. Yes, Catherine. Star Wars watch party. Go Ahsoka.
I'm kind of surprised none of this comes up in your SPFBO group.
No one asks.
Talking about food, that these kind of topics, because you want to get to know people, right? And you get to know a fair bit about people. It's like when you're at a party or something and you don't know anybody, and maybe you don't do this, I do, but it's just the way I am. You throw out a random Monty Python quote and see who picks it up, because those are your people. We
either go like super shallow of, what did you do today? Or somehow unearth like childhood trauma and conflicts with siblings. So there's no like middle ground of like, what's your favorite movie? We did talk about True Detective though. So like I said, we talked about Avatar: The Last Airbender and True Detective, but for some reason Star Wars has not come up. And I don't know why.
Well, you can
fix probably will now. I could, and then they'll make me leave the Discord because Ed doesn't seem to like Star Wars. So, I want to be liked by my other fellow finalists.
No, you want to win.
This is how I win, is just talking about Star Wars, so they all just all drop out of the competition.
Whoever wins, I think you should all do this. Don't anybody say anything and wait for the person who won to make the first move. See what
the hard part is if it's all of us who win because it's just a 10-way tie.
Yeah.
I will call foul on that. Shenanigans. No.
Yeah, it's kind of odd that it's never been a tie. You would think that, this is what, the 9th time, and you don't get in the finals being a bad book, so it's kind of surprising there's not been a tie.
Despite what some reviewers in the finalists will say and make you feel sometimes. That's where the imposter syndrome comes in, because you'll see the review and it's like, is my book supposed to be here?
But if they have a tie, then they have to buy 2 selfie sticks. So, yeah, the budget doesn't allow for ties.
It was not. The chicken wasn't, because she's smarter. I think it was just the culmination of, if there's a chicken that's just really got a grudge against you, what would that be? But she's also like not stupid. I don't know the intelligence of chickens, honestly. Some can be pretty dumb. Although Mark Lawrence did say the chicken had more personality than any chicken he's ever met before, so that might be the fantasy part of it.
I kind of wondered in Moana if Moana wasn't just super smart and brought the chicken, you know, in case of emergency.
You know, I would believe it.
So, Katie, do you have any pets? We know you don't have horses.
Or chicken.
I have cats. I've got 3.
Where are they?
One is asleep on the bed.
Are your cats asleep? No, say that isn't true.
No, the
Oh,
heating
you-
pad's on. So it's one of our senior cats, Foster. She likes the heating pad, so she's asleep on that. Sterling, who is our baby, he's only 6. He just came in. These two hate each other. Well, he likes her, she hates him. So
Right.
Sterling's an idiot. It's fine. And then Pixar is our senior at 16 years old, and he is asleep somewhere else.
Okay. Kind of surprised they're not like jumping up, bothering you.
Sterling is comfortable. But yes, 3 is probably crazy cat lady territory, which is fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's fine. I'll just
Lean
lean
into
into it.
So, are you going to do a story where it's all cats, and then you and Ed can do a mashup where his rats meet your cats?
Cats and rats.
But the rats are on boats, so they can get away from the cats because cats
But
won't
then
chase them.
I feel like I'd be obligated to do 1920s cats, just fat cats in business suits. That just seems really appealing. But Sea Cats does also sound like a fun kind of story. I've never thought about writing an all cat kind of thing, and there aren't a whole lot of cat sidekicks in my books, although my first book, my assassin book, does have a tiger, so I guess that counts. But
How do you hide it? I mean, an assassin, shouldn't they be like stealthy and quiet and all that?
it's a different kind of setup. So she's been brought in out of prison to work for a prince as a spy for him. So like people know she's there, but then she doesn't get the tiger till later. So it's not like she brought that with her. It's explained in the book.
Okay. Read the book, Bushy. Jesus.
Yeah, read the book.
When you're done your trilogy,
Mm.
you got your giant pile of things that you have to get to, or you're just going to let that percolate for a bit?
I have a folder full of story ideas. Some are very fleshed out. Some are just 2 sentences of person does this cool thing. Let's write a story. So I have no shortage of ideas, just maybe shortage of consistency to write them. So, because either it takes 10 years to write a book, or with Hills of Heather and Bone, it takes just about a year. So there's really no in between yet. So,
Which brings up the question: pantser or plotter?
I'm whatever's in between. So in high school, I realized the value of an outline because I had not done an outline for my other book series. So I wonder if that was part of the problem. But Terry Brooks showed me the error of my ways in Sometimes the Magic Works. Very good writing book. So I start an outline, but it's not like pages and pages and pages. It's maybe 5 pages max of basic plot summary, some of the characters, if I have names. And then I usually just start writing. So I'm very much a discovery writer. So sometimes the outline changes depending on what the character needs. Like with Assassins, like it just changed. I was like, this is the plot. And then I was like, but what if we do this? And then it changed. I do have like a kind of alpha list of things that happen. Once I've written the book, I'll go back through and do like, this is what happens in this chapter, and do like character motivation plot points. But sometimes I'm just like, I kind of am like Ed. I've written parts of my books on my phone, just chunks. If I find like a really good scene in my head or pieces of dialogue, I'm like, we got to write this down and then just stick it in somewhere else.
Oh, well, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, a sentence or two. Okay.
Well, no, sometimes it's pages.
Yeah, but they're very tiny pages.
Yeah, when I copy and paste them in, it's about like can be 5 to 8 pages. So
Oh God, my thumbs hurt just thinking about that.
that's I think the beauty and the curse of this generation. I'm very interested when I am into my 60s and 70s how bad my thumbs will be. Who knows?
You don't have to wait that long.
No,
Sometimes
it'll be
I feel
something
it.
different by then. You won't be doing it at all. You'll just have something, a pair of glasses, and you'll just look at the letters, and it will.
Oh, I'm so scared of that. Honestly, VR scares me because I get dizzy like real easily from that.
Yeah, you don't want to go near that then.
Mm-mm. No.
No.
So, Katie, I'm going to ask this question because I always do. And I think I know your answer now already. But when I write and I'm like, okay, in this chapter, this has to happen so I can get to the end of the chapter. And then my characters start going, no, I would never do that. Do you have that? Do you argue with fictional characters, or do you just let them have their way, or how is it for you?
They do argue with me sometimes because I'm like, how do I get this character from point A to point B based on their personality? And so it's like, if there's no character growth in this scene, because this character is either going to do something stupid, because that's where they are emotionally in this chapter, then I have to kind of go with that. Because sometimes I'm like, well, if this character did this, it'd be so much better. But I'm like, but then we wouldn't really have a story. So sometimes the character is going to make a stupid choice, and I have to write that. But again, like sometimes there's either new characters are created based on something that another character's done, and I'm like, I need someone else to fill this space. Or they're like, hey, I want to go in this direction. I'm like, okay, sometimes that happens. But sometimes I do have a character who's like very much this. But I like to allow the story to kind of show me where it's going, even though I have like an idea. But each book's so different. Some are just like, this is very cut and dry, this is where we're going. Other books, it's like, but what if we did this? I'm like, okay, that sounds good.
So, and I do have a question from way earlier on in the conversation when you said you want to hit all the different subgenres. So when are you going to write a lit RPG story?
I don't know. So there's some subgenres that I'm like, I'm really interested in that, more so than others. Like horror, I wrote a short story for horror, but it wasn't fantasy. So I probably won't dive too much into that, just because, I don't know. So lit RPG, I haven't read enough to know what's good and what makes a good lit RPG story. So probably bottom of the pile in terms of what might come out. But I do have a sci-fi story somewhere in the works, so would like to branch out into that, see what happens. Yeah, who knows? That's the beauty of this. I'm like, we could go whatever direction we want.
And I know you're on the Discord, so I know you've had to have seen people talking about Dungeon Crawler Carl.
I've heard about it. I know nothing about it except for the cover looks really interesting.
Get the audiobook. I was like, I will hate this. But everyone kept saying it's wonderful. And I bought the first book and I listened to it in 3 days, which for me is astounding. It takes me a month usually. And now I've listened to all 5 or 6 that are out, and I'm thinking about going back and it's nothing that I would normally grab, but it's funny. And Princess Donut is the cat.
I love that.
And if you don't like Princess, I don't like cats, but I love Princess Donut. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, there are several like lit RPGs from this competition that I have wanted to read. I'm like, I don't know quite what to expect. So I'm just going to have to kind of walk into it being like, I guess this is what this genre is. But I find that I'm very open to most books, even if it's not something I generally read. So as long as the story's written well, I won't really care what the genre is.
Right.
Although most horror I stay away from because I'm like, I don't like to be scared. Even if it's well written, I'm like, that makes it worse because then I would be scared.
I have one last question.
Mm-hmm.
So you've written a book about assassins. What's your favorite way of assassinating?
Honestly, I'm trying to think when I played Assassin's Creed, what was the best way? Honestly, just dropping down straight through the collarbone. It's quick and it's clean.
It's quiet. Yeah,
it's quiet and clean. Plus, just Ezio looked really cool doing it in Assassin's Creed.
And people never look up.
Yeah, poison's a little bit tricky because unless you know what you're doing and you have the dosage right and you have the right protection, it could go wrong really fast. Whereas, Blade is really clean and quick. So
Yeah, I meant to show it before. John had mentioned that he'd seen you had a horror story. Now he's gone and bought it. So,
thank
hey,
you. I would say it's not like super scary. It's more like unsettling. Really, honestly, I wrote the story because I didn't want to clean underneath my couch, and I was like, what could be under the couch? So that's how that idea came. Uh, and I sent it to my
Give hope
parents.
to us all.
Yeah, I said this is why I don't want to clean under the couch.
And I think that's a perfect place to leave it.
I think it was the only story of mine they ever read.
So, pineapple's okay. You think some Star Wars movies are actually okay. Cats are okay, which is fine. And you don't want to clean under the couch, and chickens are bad. Those are our takeaways.
Those are our takeaways. And also apparently how it would kill people. So I may or may not. Yes, you're right. How I would kill someone.
All right. And apparently Mike's book reviews has a live on right now. So our timing is perfect. We won't interrupt him too much. And Katie, thank you so much for spending 66 minutes with us. We certainly appreciate it.
Yeah,
And
thank
good
you so
luck
much for having
on
me.
SPFBO. And go get her
Thank you.
book, Hills of Heather and Bone. And good luck with SPFBO. I'm really interested to get someone back here to hear how the secret channel goes when the winner is announced.
And you have to work on Morgan to get him to say yes to come on our show.
Right. Morgan's an enigma. So I think if he wins, it's just going to be very interesting because I will pay good money if someone can get him on an interview, which, power move, Morgan. That'll be the most upstarting thing for SPFBO is no one can get the finalist, Morgan, to come up for an interview. And that is just how it's going to be.
That would be awesome. So thank you, Katie. And I'm going to end the stream so we can wave awkwardly until it finally lets us go.